China's territorial aspirations are driven by strategic ambitions, geopolitical power plays, and a desire to assert its influence. Hello everyone. In today's discussion, we delve into the complex web of China's territorial disputes, examining the intricate dynamics with not just one, but 5 countries impacted by China's expanding territorial ambitions. China shares land borders with 14 countries. It has territorial disputes in all directions, east, west, north, and south. This suggests that China maintains territorial claims in these regions. If you find this video interesting, please support us by hitting the like button. Now, let's get started. The first country is Taiwan. Following the First Sino-Japanese War, Japan ruled Taiwan for approximately 50 years. Then, in 1945, Japan was defeated in World War II, and Taiwan was returned to the Republic of China. A civil war broke out on the ROC mainland. This civil war pitted 2 forces, the Communist Party led by Mao Zedong and the Kuomintang, led by Chiang Kai-shek. The Communists won the civil war and established the People's Republic of China, with Beijing as its capital. On the other hand, the Kuomintang, defeated in the war, fled to the island of Taiwan and established a government there. China's significant interest in Taiwan stems from 2 primary factors. The first is the presence of world-class semiconductor companies in Taiwan. Semiconductors are essential components for making cell phones, PCs, game consoles, etc. A Taiwanese company called TSMC accounts for more than half of the global semiconductor market, making it an extremely valuable company. In other words, if Taiwan were to become China's, much of its share of one of the world's most important industries, semiconductors, could be China's. Additionally, Jade Mountain, standing at 3,952 meters, holds strategic military significance. The installation of radar and missile bases on this peak could potentially influence control over the East China Sea. Conversely, it is also said that without this mountain, China would find it difficult to control the East China Sea. That is how important the island of Taiwan is militarily. The United States, a leading global power, actively seeks to deter such actions by China. The balance of power between China and the U.S., coupled with Taiwan's domestic public opinion, remains delicate and ever-changing. When something happens that is likely to upset the balance of any of these, China may move in earnest. The second country is India. China and India share one of the world's longest borders. Much of the border region is high altitude and mountainous with the Himalayas, one of the highest mountain ranges in the world. The border region remains tense, with frequent skirmishes between the 2 nations' armies. This stems from both countries' claims over extensive and overlapping areas. Until this border issue is resolved, the effective line of control has been drawn as a temporary border, intended to prevent large-scale military conflict. And soldiers from both sides face each other at many of these points, a dangerous situation. Of particular interest is Kashmir, the northern part of India and the western part of China. Kashmir is surrounded by the Himalayas, the world's highest mountain range, and the Karakoram Range, the world's second highest. Therefore, the conflicts that take place here are sometimes called battles in the sky. Territorial disputes between India and Pakistan have been taking place in this region since ancient times, and in the late 1950s, the Sino-Indian territorial conflict became more pronounced. This escalated due to Mao Zedong's policies, influenced by Marxist views, which sought to control religious practices within China. Tibetan Buddhist believers revolted against this oppression by the Chinese government, but the Chinese quickly used the People's Liberation Army to put it down. The leader of the uprising, the 14th Dalai Lama, went into exile in India, where he established the Tibetan government in exile. In other words, India sided with the Tibetans. This angered China, which launched a military invasion of Kashmir, in northern India in 1962. Despite India's efforts, the conflict resulted in Chinese control over parts of Kashmir. Since then, Kashmir has been divided among India, Pakistan, and China, each just barely managing the region. Tensions along the border are high and skirmishes are constant. given that the conflict involves nuclear-armed states. Even minor escalations carry the risk of severe consequences. The third country is Bhutan. There have been territorial negotiations between Bhutan and China for 40 years. China's interest in Bhutan's Doklam Plateau has heightened regional tensions. In 2017, China took the liberty of building a military road in this area. This construction was challenged by the Indian Army, leading to a standoff at the border, resulting in both armies gathering along the border, and tensions rose dramatically. Reports indicate that since 2020, over 200 structures have been constructed by China in the area. It is speculated that upon completion of the housing, the intention is to settle Chinese nationals there, potentially paving the way for a military base. This gradual demographic and economic integration is a pattern observed in China's territorial assertions, often leading to claims of sovereignty in areas predominantly inhabited by Chinese nationals. The border problem between China and Bhutan is likely to continue for some time yet. The fourth country is Mongolia. Mongolia is the least densely populated country in the world, with a population of approximately 3.5 million people. It is a country with a peaceful image of endless prairies, with free-range sheep and horses. Geographically, however, it is sandwiched between two major powers, China and Russia. In the early 1900s, Mongolia was under the rule of the Qing dynasty, the last imperial dynasty of China, before both nations took separate paths following the dynasty's collapse. However, at that time, Mongolia became independent. It was the Soviet Union, now Russia, that supported Mongolia's independence. From then on, Mongolia's ties with the Soviet Union grew stronger. Like the Soviet Union, Mongolia became a socialist country, but the Soviet Union collapsed in 1991. This was the opportunity for Mongolia to stop being socialist and switch to a market economy. Since then, it has maintained relations with its neighboring economic powerhouse, China. Now, here comes the problem. Ethnic considerations significantly influence the relationship between Mongolia and China. First, let me explain about the Mongolian ethnic groups living within China. There is a region in China called the Inner Mongolia Autonomous Region. This region is located where China and Mongolia share a border, and approximately 4.5 million ethnic Mongolians live there. In comparison, the population of Mongolia's home country is approximately 3.5 million. This means that more ethnic Mongolians live within the territory of China than live in the home country of Mongolia. Although they live within China, they have their own language and culture as Mongolians. Their main religion is Tibetan Buddhism. However, the Chinese government has started oppression against Mongolians, suppressing Mongolian language and culture, and trying to impose Chinese language and Chinese traditions. Furthermore, it has become clear that ethnic Mongolians are being persecuted in the same region. Against this background, Mongolians living in the Mongolian homeland do not have good feelings toward China. Nevertheless, politically, Mongolia maintains good relations with China. Rather, Mongolia cannot go against China. Militarily, the power differential is too great, and economically, Mongolia is dependent on China. In fact, about 90% of Mongolia's exports go to China. The most important Mongolian export is coal, of which 99% is exported to China. This coal is traded at only one-third the world average price. Yet Mongolia is forced to sell to China because of the harsh economic conditions in which it finds itself. In addition, Chinese companies and workers have recently been pouring into Mongolia. Given its small population, Mongolia is particularly susceptible to the substantial inflow of Chinese investment and migration. For Mongolia, which is not economically independent, it is very difficult to reject relations with China. Despite the risks, Mongolia finds itself compelled to maintain its relationship with China. Mongolia faces the challenge of balancing economic relations with China against preserving its national identity. The fifth and final country is Russia. Despite both Russia and China having socialist roots, their relationship is nuanced and includes a history of territorial disputes. Surprisingly, however, China has had a long-standing dispute with Russia. It all started 200 years ago. China's predecessor, the Qing dynasty, was defeated by the British in the Opium War. Under the 1860 Treaty of Beijing, Russia acquired territories from the Qing dynasty, including parts of what is now the Primorsky Krai in the Russian Far East. This area is called the Far East because it is the most eastern part of the country. In this Far East there are areas rich in resources and large cities such as Vladivostok, which still remain Russian territory. It is suggested that China has not forgotten this historical period, and may aspire to regain these territories. There are several reasons for this, but first and foremost is military gain. Once they have the Far East region, they can deploy their navy from the Sea of Japan to the Pacific region. Another major reason is that the Far Eastern region has very rich forest and mining resources, in addition to valuable ports that do not freeze even in winter. However, one question arises here. How does China intend to regain the Far East region, which now belongs completely to Russia? Unlike the case of other countries, Russia is a military power no less powerful than China. China cannot afford to have a dispute with Russia so easily, since the economic ties between the two countries are very strong. So the usual approach is to inject Chinese nationals and Chinese capital into the region. In fact, a large number of Chinese have begun to migrate to the Russian Far East. It seems that many of them are illegal immigrants. The Far East region is vast, about twice the size of India, but has a population of only about 6.3 million. In contrast, the neighboring Chinese provinces have a population of about 100 million. As people flow across the border from China to Russia, the majority of the population will become Chinese. There is a theory suggesting that, given current trends, the Chinese population could surpass the Russian population in the Far East within the next few decades. The strategic relocation of Chinese nationals to Russia raises questions about long-term intentions. For example, if a town with a majority Chinese population were to hold elections, the person who has more Chinese policies and is more popular among the Chinese would be elected. Perhaps a Chinese person would be elected mayor. While geographically in Russia, the city's governance could lean towards Chinese interests rather than Russian oversight. Should the local sentiment shift towards independence from Russia, it could potentially align with Chinese interests. Of course, this will not happen immediately. In June 2023, there were reports in China that misrepresented the temporary use of the port of Vladivostok by Chinese ships as a return of the territory to Chinese control. Vladivostok is a port city in the Far East. Of course, this is Russian territory, and as of now, China has not taken it back. Russia was under economic sanctions following the war in Ukraine, and trade with foreign countries had been cut off. As a result, there were no more ships from the port of Vladivostok, and the port was empty. So Russia allowed Chinese ships to use the port of Vladivostok on a temporary basis. This news was reported in China as if China had retaken Vladivostok. Reports suggest that China may still have aspirations regarding Vladivostok. It will be necessary to pay attention to how China will take advantage of Russia's weakening in the future. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more insightful content. Take care and see you in the next video. Goodbye.